as well as Mr. Lemasters.
Oh, okay, I was unaware of that. So, Anna,
Did they both resign, or?
Correct, they did not reapply.
Oh, okay.
I recall, I believe, I don't know if it was both of them or one of them, had a change in their available time, and they had warned us that it was going to impact
okay,
us eventually.
so we call the meeting to order. Can we do a roll call so that, figure out where we're at?
Committee member, Mr. Bengesa,
You.
Treasurer Janetti,
Here.
Councilmember Martinez.
Here.
Councilmember Carroll,
Here,
Chairman Cooley,
Here.
Committee member Frank Parks, Committee member Mr. Beneke,
Here.
Finance Director Jeff Mullenkamp,
Here.
and City Manager Todd Barton.
here.
Okay, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll all stand. And start.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And then, are there any adjustments to the agenda? I'm not aware of any. And any conflict of interest that needs to be disclosed tonight? Okay, that moves us to our public comment period. Do we have any requests to speak?
No, sir.
Okay, so we have no speakers. So that moves us right down to the action items. And the first item we have is the adoption of the minutes for the last meeting. Do I have a motion?
So move.
I'll second.
Anybody opposed? All right, then they'll be approved. And I've just realized that I'm looking at the last meeting's minutes. The format's a little bit different. Hold on just a moment while I find tonight's agenda.
You scroll all the way to the top.
Ah, great, got it, thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is we need to reorganize the committee that we do on an annual basis. And as we've talked a little bit, Tom Lemasters is no longer on the committee, nor is Anna. We have one new member, Frank Park. So that still leaves us with an opening on the committee and no alternatives, or alternate members. So that's sitting there. We do need to appoint and approve a chair and a vice chair. I'm willing to serve again as the chair. Anybody willing to serve as the vice chair? And Mr. Park, for information, vice chair basically fills in and does what I'm doing. Should I not be able to attend, that's pretty much it. Even being brand new, you can function just very well as the vice chair. So I'm asking at this point if we have anybody who's volunteering to serve.
First of all, may I make some comments?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank you for doing it 2 years in a row. That's been a commitment on your time. It is very much appreciated. You've done a great job, and I want to make sure that as we reorganize that doesn't go by the wayside, all of your dedication. You've done a great job over the last 2 years.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to make sure that, and I'm not sure if Mr. Park knows that he's now a permanent member immediately and not an alternate member any longer, but I wanted to make sure that he was certainly aware of that if, as part of the organization.
Yeah, we discussed that just prior to our meeting.
Good.
So we have me volunteering to serve as the chair again. We need a vice chair. Anybody volunteering?
Can we entertain nominations for both? And can we take one at a time? Is that all right?
Right, that's what we're doing. I'm just
Okay.
asking if we have any volunteers, and so I'm not getting a volunteer, so let's start with a nomination. Do we have a nomination for the chair?
Yeah, I nominate Steve Cooley if he wants to do this again for another year.
Do we have a second? And all in favor, say aye.
Well,
Aye.
Any opposed?
well, I do want some discussion though before we move on, Chair, if you would allow.
Sure.
So I just want to make sure that, because we still have members of the committee here that haven't had a chance to serve as chair, and I just want to make sure that we open it up for any of those that think they might want to serve. Now would be the time to say, hey, I'm interested, and then we can discuss that if anyone is. And if there isn't, that's fine. But I just want to make sure we have a democratic and transparent process. For instance, Mr. Genetti, would you be interested by any chance?
I'm here.
Okay. And, you know, what I'm doing is I'm just allowing the committee to be able to be transparent and allow those voices to be heard. So, and we have discussion amongst us to see if others might be interested. And then the vote will tell whether, you know, where we believe the majority might go with that. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. We don't follow Robert's rules. We also follow Rosenberg rules, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we don't call for a question at this time, but we can have discussion.
Right.
If you'll allow. Mr. Genetti, can you give us just a little background about maybe why you want to be chair? If we were to discuss a new vote,
Well,
and if this didn't pass?
If called upon, I mean, the only reason I would accept the position is that Steve's been doing it for 2 years, and the idea of a rotation might be appropriate. I feel qualified because I've run other committees and boards and understand the procedure of doing that.
Okay.
That necessity arises that it would be appropriate to make a change.
Okay. And again, under no circumstances am I saying that you're not qualified. So I just want to make sure that those voices are heard and that we as committee here and perhaps entertain maybe a rotation at this time may not be a bad idea. So any other comments?
I have a question. So does anybody on the committee want to serve as vice chair? It wasn't clear to me that we had anybody.
I would be
Mr.
interested.
Beneke, you were interested in being vice chair,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
Okay. And certainly, Mr. Beneke's been on the committee for a while. Anybody else interested? I just want to make sure all the interest is brought out.
As long as I don't have to sit up there if I get appointed.
You can sit up there, period.
You do, yeah. No. And you can still wear your sneakers, though. Nobody can see that, so you're fine.
I noticed. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's all I wanted to know, was to make sure that anybody who had interested in being vice chair at least got a chance to raise their voice too. So we have 2 people interested in chair positions, is that correct? And 1 person interested in vice chair? Any interest in vice chair? No? Okay. Just making sure. We've got a quiet group sometimes, so it's
I have
nice to make sure.
a comment.
Okay. All right,
I'm not
thank you.
sure of our formation, how the council, when they created this, if they were looking at having a rotation, which would mean the transparency we need to have and the optics for anybody
Sure.
who would be following this.
Okay, no, that's a
You
good
know,
point,
that's
too.
I have no idea. And then my other question is, as an elected official, should I be on this committee as the chair?
Well, we examined the way that it was worded, and it's perfectly fine according to the documentation. So we wouldn't be breaking any rules or the way it was worded if we did it that way.
So I'm going to make an alternative motion that Baron Janetti be considered for chair. And then I guess we'll vote on the first one and then go on the second, or however you want to do it.
So, okay,
Or we can take a vote if you like first, and then it's up to you.
so we wanted to do them separately, so we'll do the chair first. Well, there's so few of us, can we do just well, let's do a roll call, I guess.
With we have the motion, we have the second, so we can do a raise of hands if you'd like, if we can, just for a count.
Right.
That way we don't just hear
Who
all
are
the
the
ayes
voting
and the
members?
noes.
Well, Mr. Parks is now a voting member.
right.
Mr. Beneke is, Mr. Cooley is, I am.
Here is Jeff?
No.
No,
Okay. So it's from here
Yeah.
around Richard.
that's correct.
Okay.
Okay,
So we have a motion on the floor for Mr. Cooley as chair. So can we take a vote for yes, for a motion for Mr. Cooley? You can raise your hand. And, okay, so it's 3. And noes?
Oh, are you voting, Mr. Cooley? on
She
that
said
one?
no's. Didn't
Oh,
you ask for
noes,
no's?
I'm sorry, no.
And we're 3.
It's for a no vote.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
7.
6, 7. I have a 3-3, so
Oh,
Someone didn't vote.
I didn't vote, I guess. Or did you not vote?
You didn't vote, Barry.
I didn't vote. Okay. No.
okay, so that's 3-4, so that motion fails.
okay. And now a vote for Mr. Janetti.
We do need a motion and a second for that.
Okay.
Motion was
Yeah,
Mr.
the motion was for
Martinez.
Mr. Janetti for
Second.
chairman.
Mr. Beneke? Ayes with a raise of hand, please. 1, 2, 3, 4. And noes? 1.
We're not coming up to a total, but I guess we don't need a total.
All right. And abstains. Okay.
Okay, now we need to vote for a vice chair,
Yes.
and we have Mr. Beneke. Do we have a motion, a nomination?
Do we have any other nominations for vice chair? I'm going to also nominate Mr. Cooley. So can we do the same manner that we just did?
Mhm.
Because, just to keep it
So is there a
with
motion? or-
two options here, so
Right.
that nobody thinks we've,
Okay, you got
Pushed
two,
it.
you got two candidates, basically, yeah.
that's
Right.
right.
Mr.
Two
Cooley.
candidates.
That's right.
Do we need do we need a motion then?
Okay,
Correct.
you're all right with that?
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
I like the transparency because,
Yes.
to be honest with you, I wasn't too happy a couple years ago when I served as vice chair and I assumed that I would move up. That did not happen, and kind of felt that that was preordained, although it probably wasn't, but I felt it was. And, you don't want that kind of
No.
stuff to look like that out there in the public, so. So win or lose, I'm happy with the results, so.
All right, so then,
I'll make a motion for Richard Beneke for vice chair.
okay, so we have a motion and a second. So now I believe we're ready to vote.
Yes, please. A raise of hands is probably easiest for Mr. Beneke as vice chair. Ayes? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and noes? Abstains?
You looked away when
You
both
looked away
Julio
when
and I
we-
raised our hands. Okay,
Were they yeses or
That
noes?
was a yes on
That was a
the
yes or no, okay.
Richard. so.
Left hand is yes, and the right hand is no.
You can't, with this new perspective, we can't see your hands. And raise them all the way.
And it's very high to see on top.
okay.
Okay. So with that, we don't need a second vote, correct?
Correct.
And Chair, if I can just make a comment. Basically, my intention for that is exactly what Mr. Beneke had mentioned. It's just a firm belief I have in any type of government that someone shouldn't be in a position for more than 2 years. It's just something I do and something I think of, and I have a real problem when you have a consistency for whatever reasons I have. But it's nothing personal.
Okay.
I think it's just.
Don't take
it's just
anything
something.
personal.
And I'm sure you don't. And
Yeah.
I just want to put that on the record, though, because my reasoning is, wouldn't matter who was up there. Two is my limit for anyone on that.
Okay? All right.
I would like to add to Councilwoman Carroll's comments about Mr. Cooley. I think you've done an excellent job, no
Thank
doubt
you.
about it. And it's not an easy job to be chair. There's a lot of times when you're dealing with the public that takes quite a bit of acumen and common sense and patience and a bunch of other stuff. And I think you exhibited that very well. And I appreciate your service.
All right. So that will be effective at the end of this meeting? Or the beginning of next meeting, whatever?
Your decision.
Okay. Okay, so that moves us on to the next item, which is a presentation from the Information Technology Department. Who is presenting that?
My team really quick. I just wanted to take a minute to introduce myself to some of the committee members. I'm Carrie Mendoza. I'm the Administrative Services Director here at City Hall. I oversee, amongst other things, the Information Technology Department. Edgar has been with us about almost 2 years now, probably feels like 5. He's gonna give you a brief presentation on where we're at, where we've been, and where we're going. And just within the last 6 months, we've added 2 employees to his team, and since they're here, all working on this lovely audio and sound system, Chris Litwin and Corey Crawford have joined his team. So this is your information technology team, and I'm gonna turn it over to Edgar to give you a little bit of information about what he's doing for us.
Edgar told me he had hair when he first came here.
He was nice too. Thank you so much, Chairman and members of the board. I really appreciate the time to talk about ransomware. Most of you have probably heard in the news and have probably seen it on TV. Ransomware is one of those things that is, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. It's one of those things that's very destructive. It's a very lucrative business, and just the name ransomware is exactly what they're doing. These hackers will download a payload of application called Ryuk, which then encrypts the data so that any user can't access it. They've been targeting public safety organizations, other municipalities, a few cities around the area. I'm not going to mention them. And I do want to provide a disclaimer. There's some things that we can't talk about today. We don't want to give anybody the security posture that we have at this point, but I do want to give you an overview of where we're at now. About 2 years, when I started here in March, we did a full assessment. That assessment provided some, it was very good to look at because it provided us a scope of what was needed. For a very long time, there was not a lot of, and we're not the only city that has run into these issues. We had some servers, so the physical security of the server was, we'll say bad. The security posture that we had was non-existent. So we had to make some immediate changes right away. The first thing that we took to council was to go ahead and provide a VMware environment. We really do appreciate that. We were able to consolidate about 20 servers, which were part of a farm, into a 3-host VMware environment. That provided redundancy for us. That provided backups also through Veeam. And so it kind of started the process of providing some business continuity. The second phase was to look at our network posture in that sense. So more of the data link and network. We then went ahead and did another assessment, provided that to council, and you guys were able to approve a purchase of Fortinet switches and firewalls. What these firewalls provide for us is it's kind of a two-prong approach. We're providing the before it happens, and then what do we do after we've been compromised? These next-gen firewalls allow us to have some visibility into the network, where before we did not have that with these older firewalls. Some of them were out of compliance. We've discussed those thoroughly about PD and CJIS compliance, and then City Hall, and we were able to make some improvements there. Just some stats on ransomware. So there's about an average of data loss during a ransomware attack has been 6 months. So that's how much data these municipalities and public safety offices are losing. When we're talking about city of Florida, I think it was there was a city in Florida, and there was about 5 cities in Texas, which I don't know how to name those cities, but I'm sure a city manager knows those city names. When they were hit with ransomware, it was about 6 months of data loss as an average. So the question really is, the question really becomes, how much is City of Beaumont willing to lose if we do get compromised? We're always doing our best to try to prevent that. And we do that by providing education for our users. So we're providing a class for some of our users. We have not had a education for our council members, but most of these attacks come through email, either through macros or a link. If you click on that link and you have administrator rights and you are a privileged user, you will get compromised. The second part of that is when we do get compromised, because it's a matter of when, how is the city going to respond? We've implemented a imaging system, which will allow us to deploy systems a little rapidly, where before it took us about 4 to 5 hours to install Windows and then other applications. We also are looking at providing, we have better virus protection. So these firewalls also have a thing called UTM. It's a universal threat management. It's able to sandbox a computer if it does get compromised. So it's able to detect and then defer. There's still a lot of things that we have to do. One of the approaches that the NIST took, and this is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, they talk about this 3-2-1 approach. What this is 3 sets of data, 2 of them being on-premise and 1 being airtight, which is away from the network. It does require some funding, and that is something that we'll bring in the future here. I'm available to answer any questions if you guys have them.
Surprise.
A lot of information.
I'm really glad that you've incorporated employee training. My question to you is, are you incorporating that into the onboarding process when you get new hires? Because if otherwise, it's a calendar training that if you hire someone on an in-between schedule, if it's not part of onboarding, that they understand security, they miss the bus for a while. So do you?
Yeah, that's something that we have not done that yet, but that's something that we will take a note and make sure that we add it to the onboarding package.
And I consider
Is
the,
that covered during your hands-on training when you give them their network access and their username and password? I think it's not documented, but you're doing.
Yeah, it's not a thorough,
Right. That's a good point.
We have an orientation form that tracks the user and who's being added and what proper groups they should be added into for him. And then within the first 3 days, when he sits down with them at their particular station, then him and his team are providing hands-on training to them.
So you'll have some security standards that you'll review with them when they're onboarded.
We can
then.
facilitate something in writing to add to that, yes.
Yeah, I think that's good. And maybe even initial off that they've done
Absolutely.
it so that they feel mentally more committed to following through. And then I have another question.
Sure.
Do you have, as part of your training, and I ask this because if we'd done council training, I might already know the answer, but do you advise them to stay away from certain applications, WhatsApp and some of the other applications that have been known to put the network at risk?
We do have some social media policies in place. However, yeah, this is something we can discuss more on the onboarding process and some of the training. Training is very important, especially with ransomware, so yeah, we can add that to the packet.
I think if we keep tightening it based on the current news that we hear in the trends, I think that that's probably, and I know that that's one of the ones that isn't off limits for some companies, that they encourage people.
Yeah, he's able to lock certain applications down from the back end, so we don't necessarily have training or a policy or something they sign off on because the network just doesn't allow it. But other things that we have to allow, we can probably put some guidelines and some things in place. We have some IT infrastructure and security policies, but we'll make sure we float them and get
Well,
signatures and make sure they're
I appreciate
up to
it,
date.
but unfortunately, the network's really become money. It's like access to the bank in its own way.
Oh.
So, you have to really sort of up the game in an area where you could be a little sleepy before. And I very much appreciate the work that you've done for that.
There was about a 90-day period that, between myself and my payroll specialist, we were getting emails all the time. Hi, this is Jeff from finance. Can you change my direct deposit? Can you do this? Can you do that? And they're not from our employees. They're spoofing because they get a list of our employee names and they send us random things and try to get us to change banking information. And luckily, nothing happened. So yes, you're right. They're smart and they're ever changing and evolving. We've talked about, there's application training to put on the desktops that we've talked about deploying for our users that sends them fake emails. Because we want to see who's going to fall for it. Where are our vulnerabilities? Is there a particular department that falls more victim than others, Our front counter staff, IT says, oh, don't open an email from, somebody you don't know. Well, front counter deals with the entire city of Beaumont residences. They have to open everything they get. So they just need to be wary what they're opening and what's attached. And like Edgar talked about macros, that can just be a basic Excel document. It's, you never know.
Thank you. I have no more.
Mr. Beneke, if memory serves me right, you were the committee member that asked for this. Do you have any specific questions?
Was I? I thought the council gave us a list. But anyway, is there any kind of an organization within your profession of cities that communicate with each other, that let
Yes.
everybody know what's happening out there?
Yeah,
And if there is, are there companies working with this organization to maximize protection?
so we do have a group called MISAC. It's Municipal Information Services Association of California. I said that really fast, but it's a group of other municipalities, water districts. We meet on a regular basis. We discuss these things. I mean, George Khalil from Riverside, he just had a seminar where he spoke about ransomware. And these are the brighter minds of the Inland Empire, and we all know about ransomware. We all know about cybersecurity hygiene. Just talking about this email threat, they're ever evolving. It's not like these bad actors are just providing the same application they were using 10 years ago. This is ever evolving, just like a regular virus. Some of the tips that we give our users are treat it like regular mail. When you go into your mailbox, you don't just grab everything and you go, oh, let me open this from the Prince of Egypt, right? You're like, he shouldn't be emailing me, or he shouldn't be sending me email. Or my Nana's been gone for 10 years, why would she send me any? So little things like that make a big difference. And you should treat email just the same way you treat your regular mail from the postal
I
office.
think that's great advice. Also within this organization, have you talked about how you store data off-site?
Correct.
So that retrieval is less difficult in the case something happens to that data?
Right, so this NIST provides us kind of the guidelines that we follow. Again, it's the 3-2-1 approach, 3 sets of data in 2 on-prem, and two of them are business content, or one of them is business continuity, and the other one is more disaster recovery. So I can go into depth on those two.
I just want to know that you're aware of that, number one, and you mentioned something about we don't quite have that yet, it's something you need extra funding for.
Correct.
Okay.
We have some layers of security, we have some measures of backups, but disaster recovery is something we do not have. We have some measures of business continuity, we don't have a full set of business continuity plan.
Are you going to be
It's the
putting
offsite.
a proposal together for?
We're always assessing our network, we're always assessing what we have, and I get to work with Carrie directly, and I bring all these issues and problems to her, and she's wonderful, and our city manager knows about them too, so we're working on those plans.
Been tackling one large project a year.
Yeah.
It's kind of been the funding source and mechanism. The first year it was, like he talked about Veeam and that was backups and virtual servers and things like that. And then this year was our firewalls and our switches, and then next year will be off-site recovery, disaster recovery, getting that data off-site for.
Correct,
Yeah, I personally, I think that's very critical.
correct.
Because when you lose a massive amount of data, probably you know what you've lost, but if you have it backed up somewhere where you can access it real quick, you could really identify quickly in terms of what you lost.
Yeah.
This makes sense in the long run to have that kind of security.
Correct. And it's these types of open conversations that really bring about an assessment of what we have. We call this RTO. What's our response time up, right? When do we bring the devices up? How much data are we losing? These are all conversations we should have in-house and then discuss with boards and council to try to figure out and mitigate a risk.
Very good.
Mr. Park, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if there's some kind of a software that you can recommend or to your employees as well as maybe council members that they would load on their own computers to minimize the chance of this, where we call it?
Ransomware. Yeah, and there's other types of malware.
Interfacing with the city?
There are so many applications out there that would help. The applications that we pick in-house, again, maybe I don't want to discuss every single one of them. Each one has its own vulnerabilities and pros and cons. So if I can recommend any, would be any type of virus scan on your computer. So having patch updates. The last municipality that got hit locally was because they didn't patch their computers with the latest Windows updates. So some of this cybersecurity hygiene would be to always do your Windows updates, have some sort of virus security, and yeah, just be aware.
Yes, Barry.
I have two questions. I'm not an expert in this area and probably violate a lot of this. Number one is, why doesn't the city have a policy that there should be no personal use of the city's network? Everybody has one of these and they can do all their own stuff. I mean, we're putting ourselves in danger letting people take traffic of their personal friends. That's how I've seen before things, friend passes you an email and it's got the bug in it. You know, I'm just saying there ought to be a policy from my perspective that says you don't use the computer for anything except work, period.
There,
We do-
yeah,
we do
no,
have-
there is.
go ahead.
Even our Windows log on to our computers, there's a
Disclaimer.
warning and a disclaimer when you log into the network that says this is for official use only. And personal email and things like that are not,
It shouldn't be coming to Beaumont, California.gov.
no, not at all. But like I said, those ones that we get from just random people, they're just spoofing and they're
Yeah,
just
I
coming in.
understand the spoof.
But yeah, but no, personal use, absolutely not.
Okay.
And we do have policies on that.
Okay, my second question's, I understand ransomware, and I've been reading about all these cities that have had problems.
Right.
I'm also concerned, would have a concern, how's our protection from just hackers that want to get into our data? Not to ransom it to us, but to want
Right.
to get private information. I mean, we have so much of it there, and it's fairly open to the public. I mean, there's some things, how are we protecting the individuals and our identity and of our employees and everything else?
It's kind of the same approach.
Same approach?
So, yeah, that 3-2-1 approach. Have 3 sets of data, have regular backups, Windows updates. There's not one secret way of doing it. Every situation is a little bit different. There's other attacks. Malware's called man in the middle, where there's a bad actor between a software application, so like on the web, and then your computer, and they're gathering all that data. So again, every scenario is different. And obviously my goal and my job here is to make sure that we prevent all those things from happening. Again, we assess it, we look at all of our risk. We've been tackling each task as we see fit, with the direction of Carrie and with the approval of our city manager and city council. But yeah, it's like we're looking at a lot of issues, but we're saying, okay, this is now what we need to tackle. And obviously, firewalls and switches was one of them. The next one would be business continuity planning, disaster recovery, and then pen testing. There has to be a way for us to test what we've implemented. So we tested before, and now we test after. What holes do we have? What other vulnerabilities are up? What new trends are out there? So it's just a constant cat and mouse, for lack of better words.
Yeah, it just concerns me about all our financial data that somebody could get in and get account numbers, the personal information of all the employees,
Right.
even our customers that work for us, contractual information that you could get, it's just a world of information that somebody can abuse.
Yeah, and again, that's, so the one thing they did do about any hackers was open ports on VPN, virtual private networks. And that would be like a way for me to connect from my house to the city network. So there was a lot of open ports in our old firewalls. We went ahead and disabled those VPNs, and then we've also encrypted and provided a token. So in order for anybody to connect, there's a 2-factor authentication. That's one way. Also for our police vehicles, MDCs, they're connecting back to our network and they're outside of the network. How do they connect? Well, we have a Verizon private network that connects those two. And then we added a layer of security, which is that 2-factor authentication, or token authentication, sorry.
Thanks.
So we're trying to do all we can.
Oh, you're right, Sam, that's good.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, yes, one more.
Only one?
Well, we have one
Maybe one.
right now.
Thank you. Edgar, I know sometimes the simplest thing ends up to be the most vulnerable point. So I'm sure you have policy on passwords, about, writing them down, sharing them, all of the usual stuff. But do you have a policy that you're either have in place or planning on putting in place to remind people to either go to 2-factor authentication, which I believe in, I do at home, or to make sure that they update and change their passwords at least every 6 months or so? Or are you doing anything in that arena?
We did update our policies about a year ago, Carrie, and they did have a lot of that information. Getting our applications, some applications that we have are software as a service, so they don't reside on premise, they're on the cloud. So there's a few things that we can do there, but we don't have the physical device here, so we adhere by whatever the contract is. I can start asking some of the applications that are SaaS, what their policies are and how they're preventing, data breaches and stuff like that. But as far as on-prem, yeah, we're constantly changing passwords, Windows passwords. Our users hate us for it, but it's part of our.
The system mandates it and forces them to change it.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And any software as a system that we subscribe to, we turn that
We'll
feature
change
on
that.
as
Okay,
well. We
good.
don't allow the users to turn that off.
Yeah, no, I
Because
think
if they
that's
aren't, we
good.
don't know about it.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Can we get to facial recognition? Is that something that
That's
we,
coming, yeah.
in the future you're thinking of?
Biometrics have always been a good factor, so it's another way to authenticate. So you can choose whether you're using your finger, your thumbprint, facial recognition is still not there, But the next thing that's coming up is AI. So AI is artificial intelligence. With this AI, they're able to put this on firewalls, and then they can start looking at your constant data. So this data stream provides you kind of a segment of what we do, right? This is what Beaumont business looks like. And anything outside of that scope, it picks it up and says, well, wait, this is different. Why is this different? So again, that's coming. It's ever evolving, and we're trying to do our best to keep our head above water here, so.
Anybody else?
I just want to make a quick comment. Just
Of course.
Thank you. I'll tell you, from the way it was when I first started, from where we are now, I can assure the public that we have made a tremendous amount, and I can't even emphasize a tremendous amount of progress.
For those of you who weren't here prior to Edgar, we contracted out information technology services. So we were lucky to have a part-time, person on site a couple days a week. And I mean, he can attest, when he went through the hiring process, I brought him in and gave him a very, very thorough walkthrough to make sure he fully understood what he was getting himself into, what kind of shape. I mean, we had servers sitting on floors and just basic power issues, power, UPS, or, no redundant power sources, things like that, so the power would go out. I mean, we have, thank you for noticing. I think we've made leaps and bounds. We're not there by any means. We still have some things to do, the offsite backups and recovery solution. But, I mean, just having, he says Veeam, just having backup is so nice, because those employee personnel records you're talking about that are so protected, oh yeah, they crashed years ago, and guess what? They didn't have a backup, or the backup was corrupted, or something to that nature. So I mean, we've seen the worst of the worst. I think even Nicole can attest to some of it, and yeah. So we've come a very long way. We still have some more to go, but everything takes time and money, and we're conscientious of how many projects we can take on in a timely manner, and how much funding and things like that. So.
And with that, we appreciate your constant assessments, because that's important that, Mr. Parton knows what to bring to us, so that we can try to keep implementing something, because we can't do it all at once. But if we can keep doing something and you can get on top of what's the most necessary at the moment, I think we're gonna try to at least, get a good hack on it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and I mean, it takes a village, right? So it's with the approval of council, our city manager, our leadership, and obviously Carrie and support, so appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, sir.
This was an oral report. You don't have a written report, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
By
good.
tomorrow
If you had a
morning.
written report, we may need to take an action to accept it and send it to the city council.
No, sir.
But we don't, so we're fine. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
The next item is the list of council assigned tasks. We went through this last time, but I think we may need some changes in view of the fact that we've lost a couple of committee members. So the first one was to develop a CFD training program for local realtors and a CFD frequently asked questions to document on the city, or to post on the city's website. I believe Anna was doing some of that. I'm not sure what progress has been made. I believe we were waiting for some feedback from Mr. Parton having to do with some local meeting. Is that correct, Richard? I think you were.
Yes, I don't know if you want to give the report, I can give the report, whatever, but Todd, myself, and Mayor Santos met with 4 members of the Board of Realtors several weeks ago. We had a very, very, very nice meeting. I thought it was just, these citizens we have here in Beaumont, they really want to step up to the plate. They want to be involved. They love their community. And it's really a joy to work with people like that. Anyway, we talked about a lot of different things. We talked about the council's concern in terms of transparency in this whole arena of these CFDs, and the fact that they're kind of the point person when it comes to new people coming to the community, putting together deals to buy property. And we kind of asked them how they would like to maybe assist us in getting the word out and having some transparency in this whole arena. And so several ideas came up from very complicated types of situations, training and all kinds of stuff, to very simplistic brochures, Q&As, and things of that nature. We ran the whole gamut of idea sharing at this meeting. It was quite open, quite refreshing. In the end, we kind of felt that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Todd, we felt that the Q&A brochure was a good initial attempt to answer some basic questions, because there are a lot of basic questions related to the CFD program that a lot of people ask, same kind of questions. And we thought we probably might be able to get some assistance from Webb Associates, whose number is on the tax bills that we all get, for clarification. I'm sure they could give us a readout on the most common questions that are asked. People calling that number obviously have questions on that tax. Also, they were not aware that our website has a lot of information. The city's website has a lot of information on the various districts and the timeframes for these things to expire. One of the things that they also gave us feedback on, which we already kind of knew, was that there's a difference between the tax for facility development and the tax for ongoing personnel support for those facilities. In other words, you have a tax to build a fire station. Well, you have to put fire people in there to operate the fire station. Well, this tax also goes to help support those costs. And a lot of people didn't understand that. They looked at it more akin to a mellow roof for building schools. Once a school was built, over 20 years, amortized the cost for the building of the school, then the tax would go away. So there's kind of two things involved with that. But anyway, that's kind of just a generalization of the discussion that went on. And Todd, you want to fill in the blanks in terms of the brochure and the database and basically the other things we talked about?
Yes, sir. There's not many holes you left there. That's pretty good. So just the key thing was KISS. Keep it simple, stupid was the main thing. Just clear, simple, easy to identify. And one thing I will mention too, it wasn't just the written documentation, but it was also a link back to the city website. So information, and as they said, hey, we like to deflect. So we as realtors may get information and we like to deflect back to the city to get information. We said 100% that's appropriate and that works for us. So what we talked about is needing to make sure that our website's going to be up to date and we've got companion information that people can drill into and get to some other things. One last thing is they were also open to an annual meeting. So we talked about something in the time frame that would go into effect after we enroll the tax for the year, is then to try to have a follow-up conversation with the real estate community. So overall, very positive response, and there was definitely a level of excitement about trying to be brought into the loop. And what we drilled into was the easiest part of this whole process, ironically, is when you're buying that property with the first owner. So you're buying from the developer or the builder. It's the secondary tier that I think is where the most critical issue is coming into play. So I'm buying that second or third generation homeowner. What's there? How does it affect that? And what are the options, or what are the things that kind of roll in for that next generation buyer? So those were kind of the other additional takeaways that I guess I took from that process.
Okay. So are we ready, or do we have enough information to go forward and post something?
I would like to keep this on as an ongoing, because we don't have the informational brochure, yeah, we don't, you know, we don't know how this is all gonna work, so I'd like to keep it on there. I don't know if we need to report back every month on it, because there may not be anything to report on.
Correct.
But, I think it's something you need. Sometimes you take something off and you kind of forget about it, but I like keeping things on there if we can. Or appendize it, or however they say, what, you put a little pin in it to come back in 6 months or something like that. We could do that too, if that would be appropriate. But I felt very, very confident that we were moving in the right direction. Or I don't think we're there yet, but we're moving in the right direction, so.
Can we put a 3-month tickler on this?
Yeah, now we might have a brochure, a rough draft out by then.
Yes, Barry?
I agree, you might need time, but I think, you know, your next step would be, to me, it sounds like putting this FAQ together. So
Right.
some kind of interface with web that says, what are the most frequently asked questions? And you could have a list of them.
I think that that's occurring, and we also told the realtors, and they agreed that we would get that draft to them so they could take a look at it and be comfortable with it, so.
They see what they are, we see what they
Right.
are, and then go into developing a brochure with an
Correct.
agreed upon.
Correct.
Okay. And so who's following that?
Well, Todd kind of,
Todd, you kind of
We're on the lead.
inherited that?
Yes, sir.
All right, very good, thank
You
you.
don't have much to do.
Oh, I've been working on it night and day. This has been the only thing I've been working on.
Okay, so the next,
but I want to thank Todd and Mayor Santos too for putting that all together. That was very helpful. I know it was kind of, the holidays kind of interrupted us, and so we lost a little time, but, you know, we got the meeting together, and again, it was a great meeting, so I want to thank you guys for that.
so the next item is the assist with the request for the RFP process for the independent financial audit services. I believe where we're sitting on that is waiting for the current audit to be completed so that we know where we're going from that. Yes,
So, Mr. Chair, if you could remind me, who is on this particular project in addition to myself?
Barry and I, as I recall.
Okay, all right. We're going to be ready to move. What I'd like to do is have one of my staff members also, one of my senior accountants also on that committee, and then bring in a fifth member of that review. And so maybe we could secure somebody from senior management in the city, if that would be acceptable to this group. And we'll be ready to roll pretty quick. The audit is coming to a near completion, and we'll need to get moving probably by mid-February. I want to pull that team together, no later than late February. So we'll have to come up with criteria for the selection, and we've got a couple of good examples of RFPs that have been used by other cities and what we used last time around. So we'll have a good jumping off plan, so.
Okay. Then 3, 4, 5, and 6, I believe, are all just sitting, waiting for some time to pass to finish off 1 and 2. Anybody have other information on that?
Mr. Chair, on number 3, I would like to try and bring that back to the committee in about 2 months. So
Okay.
we can, and what I'd like to do is bring the draft of what we have and at least start that discussion, and then again, see how rapidly we can move forward. Because I think that, quite honestly, it's probably best for us to move forward on our investment policy because there's money at stake, so.
So can we agendize that for the meeting in April or May? Which would you prefer?
I think we can target April for me, at least to bring what we have. And then we'll probably won't be able to finalize that until May or June.
Okay, that works.
4, where are we gonna go with 4? Because we just had our presentation.
Yeah, I'm not
How do we wanna wrap there or move? 'Cause that's the IT, security.
Yeah, is there anything else that we need to do on that?
I don't think so. I already checked it off.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah, I think we
I
got.
thought it was very positive, and
Yeah, very
comments we'll make tomorrow night.
Yes, so I think we can just remove that from the process. 5 and 6, I believe then are still waiting for some more time to pass and some other items to be done. And that moves us to topics for future agendas. There are a couple items that we need to talk about.
Before that, do we, it's not on the agenda, but we do have the data, we do have.
Yes.
Can we discuss it since it's not on the agenda?
That'll be presented by the finance director under his update for you. And so we can present and have some questions on that.
Well, we don't even have him on the agenda.
On the agenda.
Anyway, since this is standard procedure, actually, but then the public doesn't get a look at this technically, theoretically, but.
Yeah, they're not on the agenda, so we probably shouldn't discuss them in any kind of depth. They're out there. Let's talk about a couple other items, and maybe there'll be somewhere to handle this.
Was Jeff gonna give an update tonight? Yeah. Jeff can, as part of your update, highlight.
I'm
what he
happy to
handles.
briefly discuss what I put before you whenever the time is appropriate.
Okay.
You're gonna give this tomorrow night at the council? Is that on the agenda for tomorrow night?
It's not. I don't believe.
Okay. What I thought we'd just decided last time, and I could be wrong, is that we were gonna add to the ongoing agenda an item for the subcommittee that's doing the review of the processes that we have in place to ensure that we continue to be transparent. And that didn't appear on the agenda this time, but I'd like to have that going forward. And Barry and I, and occasionally another member, were looking at different items that are on that list that came from the State Controller's Office, and that we came up with some items to be doing. Barry and I have been working on that. We did have one basically ready to go tonight, but there was some hiccups and the information didn't get transmitted quickly enough, so we'll move that to the next month. If we can get that on the agenda so that it's there every month, and we anticipate that we will be doing one of those items every month to make sure that they're always there. And then we've had a request to move the regular meeting day from the first Monday to the second Monday of the month, so that this committee is not meeting the day before the city council. We discussed that a little bit last time, but decided to bring it back this time. And discussion on that. What we're seeing is that we get information and there isn't a lot of time to discuss that and before we hand it off to the city council. Going to have everybody's opinion. And number one, does it create a timing conflict for anybody?
I personally like the idea, because I've always felt that Monday, because the council meets first and third Tuesday of the month, and we're meeting on the first Monday, we did get things that, from a general, again, you're talking about transparency, and from a general public's perspective, you get something and it looked like we didn't give it much review or whatever, and then boom, it goes right to the council as a recommendation, one way or another. I would not be opposed to it.
Can I ask a question?
No, the council.
Okay, so my question is, the times that has happened is most of the time has been when the audit comes in, correct?
Correct.
When else has that been issued that it's been so tight? I don't remember another.
I can't recall.
Another thing that set that up.
I can't recall, to be honest with you, but I have felt a little bit of a pressure that, okay, the meeting's tomorrow. What if we don't act on this, or what if we don't do this? Do we mess up the council?
No, I agree with that pressure, and I agree with the concern. I guess I'm only backing off to the point where the only time that I've felt the pressure in terms of the timing has been if the audit comes in and shortchanges us on that time period in between there. So this is what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at that is that I don't think that that should happen. I don't think that we should allow that pressure and that window to be too short on those occasions. But maybe we should consider, doing a special meeting if there's a timing issue with the audit, where we do a special meeting just to do the review of the audit with enough time before the council meeting versus changing the date on a regular basis. Now, I'll tell you why I bring that up. I bring that up because most of the information that we take forward to council from this meeting is transmitted by the treasurer in the council meeting the next day. So the information is fresh. There's, if an issue needs to be brought up, he brings it up the next day. The only real problem I see is really with the audit. And so why do I even care about that? What's another Monday? The first week of every month in terms of my time for meetings I'm assigned to is usually the most difficult week of the entire month. And so I've really made sure that I have the first Monday of every month where there's committees I wouldn't be on, et cetera, because I said, this is the week that I have to dedicate to the city for this particular meeting. So if I change it, I have to go back and review and change a lot of things. So, but I'm only one person, so I will go along with the change if there's a really good reason for it.
Well, Chair, I think also we forgot to mention the fact of the staff, because we've got the clerk doing 2 agendas, and then we have the city manager trying to do 2 things. And, there's times I've wanted to discuss stuff with him right before a meeting, and we've got this meeting that we're dealing with. And, it just, at times, not all the time, but at times it does seem a little cumbersome. So I'm in favor of going to the second Monday for that reason, for staff and for I shouldn't say convenience, but just means more practical to me.
How does staff feel about it in terms of reports and their schedule?
Well, I guess you could say this really was prompted by me, but because, and like the agenda tonight, and I apologize, this is totally my fault for the oversight, but we were jammed up working on a very intensive city council packet, and then, trying to get some of this information together. It's overwhelming, as we're trying to push through, and some of these packets are very detailed for the Finance and Audit Committee. The other component, so part of that is that crunch that's there. Now, there's always going to be agenda conflicts, like, when we move, if we're to move this meeting, it's going to follow on with the Planning Commission on the following Tuesday. So there's always meeting agenda conflicts, but the council packet is very intense. And so there's that issue. But the other is the timing of our financial, so by meeting the very first Monday, a lot of times we may not be capturing the best end of month financial information on those reports. And so having an extra week allows us to make sure we can kind of tighten up and report on our financials. So I would say you may be getting a little bit better current information if we were to go back an extra week. And then it does give us an opportunity really to have that follow on with city council that next week, versus having a 2-week break between those 2 things. So I know there's give and take on those issues, and obviously we're gonna do 100% what is best for the committee in your opinion. But that was the rationale on the staff side that we had looked at, trying to see if we could push this one back a little bit to get some time.
With that, I'll sort of change my perspective. I'm okay with that.
Okay? So
Yeah,
then,
I often thought that it put a lot of pressure on you too, the staff, having these back-to-back council finance budget meetings. I kind of felt that sometimes in the reporting and some of the data and information I was getting. I didn't bring it up because I thought, well, it's kind of, it was how it was set up originally. Nobody ever explained the rationale to me originally, but I thought, well, Monday. But now it's being brought up, I'll give my 2 cents. I'd rather go the second Monday.
I think the rationale that Todd just presented
Yeah.
makes sense. The issue has always been with the audit report coming in, and I think that may require a special meeting anyway.
It always
So that we
has.
can,
We've
that
always
we'd
had-
have a special, because that's what you want to digest that night. You don't want to be playing a big agenda. So I do, but I have a question. The other members of this committee, is that all right, or do people have a conflict that would inhibit?
So-
We're already down to 4 members. You're good?
Okay, so
You okay?
I think what might be appropriate is to take a vote on that. And of course, we serve at the pleasure of the council. But I think we take a vote on whether or not we do that, subject to the council. I don't want to use the word veto, but subject to the council's feedback as to whether or not it's acceptable to
We
the
got 2
council as a
votes out
whole.
of 5 already.
The council has left us with an ability to sort of sub-govern ourselves, and unless there's a reason, and you could bring this up in the meeting tomorrow about the change of date, and unless there's a reason, in which case we could bring it back and review our decision. But I think we're free to make a decision tonight.
Well, then
I make a motion that we move the Audit and Finance Committee meeting from the first Monday to the second Monday of the month.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, then it will be moved effective the next meeting, which will then be the second Monday in March. We're in it.
Well, it's February today.
You want to come next Monday?
Mr. Chair,
Okay,
And we'll update the city website, et cetera, with the new dates after the council meeting, if there's no objection.
okay. Now, we do not have on the agenda a report from the city finance manager, but we did have a request for a special meeting. Would you like to explain that?
yes, I appreciate that. I was hoping that I was going to be able to bring the audit to the Finance Committee tonight. But we were unable to get that arranged through our auditors. We're working on the last few things. We are on the final stretches of it. I would really like to keep with bringing the audit to the city council on February 18th. That's my current plan. But to do so, I need to get it in front of this body first. I would like to see if this council or this body would be willing to meet next Monday, which would be kind of the new schedule, if you will, but on a meeting just to discuss the audit. And so if that's possible, then I can stay on track with the 18th in front of the council. And the 2 members that have been asked to do a more in-depth look, I will set some time aside on Monday to meet their schedules, to make sure that they can get a more in-depth review and question and answer with me and my staff to go through the audit before the meeting itself.
Okay,
Question,
yes.
would you have that preliminary audit information Friday before next Monday?
My goal is, and I told the auditors we're going to do this, so I will be getting out the draft audit. It'll be a final draft audit that will come out to all of the committee members by the end of the day on Friday.
And again, remember, this is a draft, not the final.
Correct, but I don't want to get it on Monday at the meeting. It doesn't be no good.
You can do your review and have your questions ready.
Right, right. So, and I assume there's no scheduling conflict, the room's available, if not, okay. So then, I have a motion to set and agendize that meeting for next Monday, and the agenda will be just the presentation and discussion of the draft audit. Have a motion?
So move.
A second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we'll have that special meeting, and the agenda will be limited to the draft audit and discussion of the draft audit. We would normally get a report from our treasurer, what's going to be presented to the city council.
Yeah,
Go ahead and do that now.
well, I can run through. What I'm basically gonna go is through the council assigned tasks and update them. Been giving them that the last couple of months. As far as, I'll give a little report on the CFD, talk about the process we're getting ready to implement on the audit services. I'll mention about the IT presentation. I have some comments that I will give on that, and that we're holding on 5 and 6. And I will also, as far as the IT, I'm gonna talk about that, you know, there was a thorough review done 2 years ago, because we were in really great shape, and we now have 3 sets of data as far as our backup, a very proactive approach to prevent ransomware and such by education of the users, and we have better buyers protection. And the change of date for the meeting is the reason that we have here, and I'll ask the council if that's okay.
All right. Anybody have anything else that they need to discuss? Okay, with that, this meeting will be adjourned with the next regularly scheduled meeting for March 9. And with a special meeting next Monday.
At 6 o'clock?
6 p.m. next Monday? All right,
PM,
that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, 7:14.
We,
You're more than welcome. It just feels good. That's what I got. Feel real comfortable. Well, that's what it has to be. Everybody's willing to do it. We needed somebody to push it.
so,
All right. Chat with the guy back in there.
Before you go, I just want to say thank you. You said no hard feelings, and I appreciate it.
No, you know, the bottom line is, when I hear that, always comes up, well, you know, the city let all that money be stolen, what are they doing? And I feel really comfortable with saying, hey, I know for a fact
I know,
that what happened can't happen again.
I know.
And we feel good about it. That's why it's asking, anybody to do it, they needed somebody to push it.
We don't have enough granular data to budget on it.
Well, and we had a request from Jeff to cancel this meeting.
Tie a 6-month budget.
No, we can't do that.
Yeah.
We need that consistency.
Absolutely.
Because we announced that audit's out, that will have a lot more public. And
That's right.
we put it on for and they'll do it.
Yeah.
Exactly where it's at. Oh, they canceled, they canceled, they I don't need to bring them.
Feel free, if you don't have my.
Yes.
Feel free to reach out to Paul. Would you? I'll go with updating. But I'm always dealing with your feedback.
You know me, I'm hands-on.
I was gonna say the little girl under the table.
I think that the easier you can make it in terms of how a layman might take a look at it, the better off you are. Nobody's CPA, you know.
I got 30 days for
Yep, good. Good, it's good to see
If
some.
you want, you can follow me on WhatsApp for you, or I can email, whichever you prefer. Okay.
I won't get to it tonight. It'll be on the 18th.
Okay, I'll see you next.
Welcome to the committee.
Thanks, Lisa.
How are you? Good to see you.
But typically the others are posting it on their websites, which is 6 months down the road. So
that's what I had fed over to the interfaces.
Sitting up there watching this guy.